I've got a fun project for you today. This is the Articulating Man project. It's a great riveting exercise, and it's really important to learn riveting even before you learn to solder. You need good cutting skills and really good drilling skills, so get some practice in and take this on. You don't need much in the way of equipment either. Check it out. For this project I'm using 0.8 thick brass sheet, and for the rivet pins I'm going to use this 1.2mm round brass wire. Now if you go to the website you'll be able to download the design from there. It is a free lesson, so just sign up and go to free lessons, and in the curriculum you'll see a handout, so just grab that if you want to do my design. This one I've huddled it together so that you can stick this on the sheet and be really economical with your metal as you're cutting it. If you're a complete beginner or you've never done riveting before, then this is a slightly larger version, so I recommend that you do that one rather than the smaller one. So the first thing I'll do is I will stick this onto the sheet, so I'll cut it out. So I'm just using normal paper glue, and just to make it stick better I'll just rub over the surface with some emery paper. This cleans off any grease off the surface and just makes a better bond. Okay, I will find the tightest corner to get the paper on. So that saves me a bit of metal around here and here, and I'll allow that to dry. So I'll go and have a cup of tea and I'll see you in a minute. I've turned my bench peg upside down so that I'm working on the flat side rather than the sloping side. That's a lot easier for me. I can keep the work square to my saw blade. I'm using a 4-0 saw blade. Make sure that you keep the blade lubricated with some wax and get cutting. Cut outside the line so that we can file up to it later. So plan your cutting carefully, and you want to be able to hold on to something whilst you're doing your cutting wherever possible. I'm going to make some of these limbs a little bit fatter than the design. You can just customise them however you want. You can make them really chunky, but don't make them too much thinner. You need some room around where the rivets are going to go. So now I'll just file up the around the edges. I'm filing a slightly rounded shape to the edge, just to soften it. And if you're having trouble holding your work whilst you're filing, then you can use pliers, but make sure they're parallel pliers and they're not going to mess up the surface of the metal too much. And just push it against your bench peg as you file, and once you've been around all the edges, you can then use a buff stick to get rid of the tool marks. You can use a strip of emery paper and just wrap it around your half round needle file just to get into the corners. And now you can peel off the paper and just give the faces of the pieces an emery clean. I've got here an emery board. It's just a piece of MDF, and I've taped some 800 grit emery paper onto it, so it's nice and flat. And this is just masking tape. What you do is you double the masking tape over so it's sticky all around, and roll it up, and you can fold it then into a little square like that and put it onto your piece, and it will stay on your finger as you emery clean the surface. Turn it over, and the figure of 8 motion that I'm doing ensures that the direction of the emery is crossed all around, so you're not going to get lines when you polish it later. You now put your components together to plan how you're going to rivet it. Now what you don't want is for the parts to be too close together, because they will interfere with each other when they're articulating, so just make sure you've got a little bit of a gap between. So the way I've got it there, I'm quite happy with that. The head also, you need a little gap between the head and the arms. The legs can go the other way if you prefer, that's entirely up to you. Looks more like a monkey that way. I'm going to have them going the same way. So now I'm just going to mark out where the drilling is going to take place. So quite happy with that. Going to drill the head around about there, and you need to make sure that the holes, when you drill through, you will have enough room on the body, and it's not going to break through on the edge. So make sure you plan for that as well. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to do 2 decorative eyes as well, there and there, and whilst I'm drilling, I'm going to drill right at the top there for a jump ring. If you don't put a little indentation at those points, then the drill could wander off and damage the surface of the metal. So you need to put a centre punch mark, or burr a little divot in there, and that'll keep the drill steady. Now if you're going to centre punch, then make sure you put your pieces on a steel block like that, and it must be clean. I'm going to opt for putting a tiny little divot there with a 0.8mm ball burr, and by doing this I'm not going to leave any marks on the underside. So you need to be pretty confident with your drilling and burring to do it this way. So get the burr going nice and fast, and then just touch at that point. The rivet wire that I'm using is 1.2mm thick, and the drill I'm going to go through with is a 1.1mm drill, so it must be slightly smaller than the wire. And if it's a lot smaller than 1.1, then drill through and just use your drill like a file. Move it in and out like so, and do that until the wire fits in. You don't want the wire too sloppy. So that fits in and it moves around. I will open it a little bit more once I've drilled this one here. The one at the point here, just at the top of what will be the head, and that's going to have a jump ring going through there. So if you're going to use the same wire, the 1.2, then open it out so that the wire is really sloppy. I'm holding the piece steady with my parallel pliers. I'm being very careful not to damage the metal because I've cleaned it up ready for polishing later on. So these are going to be the decorative eyes, so I'm going to do a nice mushroom rivet for these. So again, just work on getting the pin in there, the wire really tight. I'll start the riveting with the decorative rivets that are going to be a mushroom shape. So they're going to be rounded on the top, the face side, for the bulging eyes, and they'll be flat at the bottom, so a flush rivet at the bottom. So flatten off the wire, put it in, and have just a fraction sticking out on the underside. So the top side is going to have a little bit more wire showing. So I'm using my end cutters to cut it, and you'll see that I've got probably about 1 mil poking through that I'll use to form the eyes, and flatten the wire off again. And do exactly the same. Try and keep your wire in there that you've just done. Cut it off. That's probably too much hanging out on both sides there, so I'll just push it through and take off a little bit more. If the wire's too long when you're trying to rivet it, it's going to bend. So you only need a little bit hanging out. Okay, that should do it. This is my riveting hammer. You can use any small hammer you like. I'll just work right on the edge of the block and just start the riveting on the top side. Be careful not to strike the actual sheet. So we want to get the metal to start to spread. And it's now firmed up. The pins are flat at the bottom, and the more I hammer the top, then the more that the bottom of the rivets are going to spread, and that will hold them in place. So now I'm going to form the shape of the eyes, and to do that you can use a steel punch with a domed end. In this case I'm using a piece of brass 3mm round wire. Now the reason I use this is because if I do contact my work, it's not going to cause that much damage, and I should be able to clean it up alright. So steel, if you dent your work, then it's going to be a nightmare cleaning it up. So as long as the brass is hard, so this is hardened, then it's a good metal to use for doing this kind of decorative work, and it's very easy to make your little punch. So it's only about 3 centimeters long, and this is a 1.5 mil ball burr. So you just put a little divot on the end like that, and that's what you put over your rivet. So you'll feel that it grabs the rivet quite nicely there, and give it a few good whacks like that. Now if your wire's too long, it'll start bending over, so just be careful of that. That's why I kept it quite short. And you can see now that you've got a nice shape to the eyes there. Now if your brass is starting to bend, or you think it's too soft, then just put it on the steel block and just hammer all around it, and that will harden the metal. Now if you haven't already done it, just drill through all the other limbs and get them so that the wire will pass through and they'll move like that. So they can't be too loose, but they can't be too firm if you want it to articulate properly. Okay, that's how it should be. I just remove the flashing from around the edge of the holes on both sides, and to do that I'm just using a cone burr in a pin vise. This is really handy. If I stuck this into my handpiece and did it with the did it that way, then I could take off too much. All I want to do is remove that bit of metal there. If you haven't got one of these, you can just use a large ball burr and just do it by hand like that. Now go back to the planning stage, put it back together as you want it, and with a fine nibbed texture pen, just put a little mark through onto the body. And again, put a little divot in there, or use your centre punch. And drill through exactly the same. Get your wire and make sure that the wire has some movement. Okay, I'll get the head on first. Flatten the wire. And again, you just want a little bit of metal hanging out the back end, and around about a mil. Very hard to judge that, but I'll show you how I've got mine set up. So that's the amount of metal there, which is actually too much, so I'm just going to file that down a little bit. So that is better, so it's almost flush at the back, and it's probably, when I say a mil, if I actually measured that, it'd probably be more like half a mil. So this first rivet is a little bit tricky because you've got the decorative eyes, and we don't want to mark those. They're looking pretty good. So what I've done is I've turned it upside down. I'm just going to start the process on the back side just with I'll just use my chasing hammer and just get it so that it flattens out a little bit, and it's not going to come out then. Now I'll turn it over and I'll give you a chance to have a look at that now. And with my brass punch, give it a bit of shape and just make sure that that's firmly in there. So that one's articulating, but the limbs are going to have a lot more movement, so I've got a clever little way of getting more movement out of them. So what you need is a piece of sellotape. So pull up a few centimetres and double it over so it's not sticky on either side. And again, prepare your wire. And work out, I picked up the leg, not that it really matters, they're very similar shapes, and put your pieces together with the sellotape in between. Line it up. When this one's lined up, it's just rubbing against the head component. So what I need to do is just take off a little bit of metal around the hole. Okay, that's got more movement now, so back with the sellotape, just stick the sellotape in between and poke your wire through. and cut off at the top there, and that's how it's looking. I think I cut the right amount off there, so I don't need to file it. Oh no, hang on. Yeah, that should be fine. So you just want to make sure that the parts aren't going to come undone later on, so that is really firm. I'm wobbling it from side to side and that is okay. So now I'll just pick out the sellotape and get a little bit of movement going. So that'll loosen in time. Just make sure all the tape's out. It is, so I'll just keep moving that around and we should get some good free movement out of that. I'll do the next one. I think the legs look better behind the body, but that's up to you if you want to continue on the same side or not, but we'll see how this looks. I'll make a jump ring to hang the little man from, and just to make one single one, just got a stake here, it's 5mm, and I use the same wire. Just wrap it around once, overlap to make sure you get a complete jump ring like that, and as this is a solderless project, I'm not going to solder this jump ring. I'm going to get the joint as tight as I can. So put it in, 2 pair of pliers, push the ends so they overlap, and then line it up. And we have it really tight, and I need to get my little man dancing a little bit first before he's fully flexible. So I'll give it a bit of a clean up and then we'll take a look. I think this leg could be thinned off a little bit. Might have got that mixed up with that one, but anyway, still looks pretty cool. And there we have it. And as you can imagine, if you turn those arms the other way around and that leg the other way around, then it'll look more like a monkey. That was a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed.